Welcome back to the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael.
And I am James.
And today we are discussing the Interstellar Song Contest, which is the 6th episode of the newest series of Doctor Who, which aired just today on May 17th, 2025. And it's written by Juno Dawson. And apparently she has previously worked on Doctor Who material before. She wrote the first 13th Doctor book in the new series adventures called The Gold Doctor, and she worked on a couple of Big Finish audios for Torchwood, and along with that, she also worked quite a bit on Doctor Who Redacted, which, to be honest, I'm not quite sure what that is, but hey, she did a lot of work on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure when we're going to talk about it, but Doctor Who Redacted is very interesting. I've read a little bit about it, not too much. But it was during the time of the 13th Doctor, which fits in considering she also wrote the first 13th Doctor novel. So it kind of all works out in that regard.
Yeah, and this is the first time that she's written an actual televised story, so it's nice to see them come on decently strong.
I do wonder how much of the ending, for example, might have been RTD, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, I imagine a lot of that stuff is probably required in a way to be there.
I'm not sure what that delineation looks like. Obviously, he's hard writer and head of the series, so...
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes on toward the end of this episode, and to be honest, I imagine it's most of what people are talking about, and in much the same way, we're not going to talk as much, I would argue, about the body of the episode. We're just going to get to the quote-unquote important stuff. So, we're going to talk about it just as much as everyone else does. So, I guess before those happy moments, James, if you wanted to briefly discuss the plot.
Yes, I saw, and for those wondering, we finished this maybe just 20 minutes ago. So we're all excited to discuss what we just saw at the end of this. The plot is as follows. After the control room of the 803rd Interstellar Song Contest is hijacked, and the audience is ejected into space, the Doctor and Belinda must race to stop them from broadcasting a daughter wave to 3 trillion viewers. And to those who don't recall what a daughter wave is, it's not good. I'll phrase it that way. We'll discuss it a little bit later. But it's not healthy for those 3 trillion viewers.
Yeah, it would not be advisable. It's not a good way to end the broadcast. So in this one, we have Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, Varada Sethu as Belinda. Then we have a handful of names that I think of moderate import. There's a Rylan Clark who plays himself. He's like one of the hosts of this Interstellar Song Contest. Now, it's here that we should mention that I'd never heard the name Rylan Clark before in my life. Apparently, Belinda and the Doctor were both excited to see him. I'm assuming he's like a host of Eurovision or something. I really don't know. I'm just guessing because I have no idea. And I don't care enough to look, to be 1,000% honest.
Yeah, even if he's not the host of Eurovision, he's certainly a host of something like this, I would assume. I don't know why he would matter if he wasn't.
Yeah, and apparently he has been cryogenically frozen, and I guess every time they do an Interstellar Song Contest, they unfreeze him and force him to get back to work. I don't know the mechanics behind that, and they don't go into it, but that doesn't sound like a particularly pleasing existence.
No, doesn't that sound like a pleasing existence? I'm not sure how that's supposed to work anyway, because if he's been frozen, then he wouldn't know any of these artists who he's presenting. Now, you could say he's getting the information through his earpiece, but at one point he was presenting information after the control room had been hijacked. So I'm not sure how that quite works. But beyond that, I'm sure it was a nice little acting gig for him. And obviously, Belinda knew him, the Doctor knew him, so he mattered. And I like the other guest appearance a lot more.
Yeah, that would be playing himself is Graham Norton. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know Graham Norton either. I think he has some show, because I'm pretty sure it's like clips of like previous actors who have played the Doctor on the Graham Norton show. So I don't know him, but he must be some talk show host over in the UK. Oh, he was. I don't know if he still is. But he plays himself in sort of like a hologram in a museum. So he himself in universe has long passed away, but his hologram is they giving information during a dramatic reveal toward the answer. At the very least, I recognize Graham Norton more than I do whoever the hell Rylan Clark is, so hey, it's something.
Yeah, no, I quite enjoyed seeing him. I've actually never seen any of the Graham Norton show, but if you watch BBC America, you can't help but see commercials. And obviously Doctor Who is not being aired on BBC America right now, but nonetheless, but either way, we saw it so many times when we were watching Doctor Who episodes as we were growing up. It was basically unavoidable. So yeah, I recognized him a lot. And I knew for a fact that they were not going to just have the small clip in the museum. I figured they were in the museum for a reason. They were going to go back to it, and they did at the end when they had the, as Michael mentioned, the big reveal, or one of, you could say, many big reveals in this episode.
And next up, we have those who facilitated the takeover of the Interstellar Song Contest with a character just named Kid, played by Friday Fox, and Win, played by Iona Anderson. Both of these characters are from the same planet of, I think it's technically Halia?
I thought it was Halius, but it could be Halia. Halia actually sounds more right.
Yeah, I actually don't have it right in front of me. It's either Halia or Halius, but yeah, either one works. They're both part of the same species, and this is a species that has a lot of negative things said about them. They face discrimination, like technically speaking, they're not allowed to be singing. They're also not hired by a lot of people, so they get really screwed over, and there's a backstory to them. And Win is working within the Interstellar Song Contest, and she was helping Kid, who's like an outside source, come in and hijack the whole program. So they're working together for their own nefarious needs. And it's worth mentioning that Win looks somewhat similar to Eve Myers.
Yeah, I couldn't help but noticing literally every time she was on screen that the actress who played Wayne, Iona Anderson, which is a pretty beast name, I think there's a Skyrim character named Iona. I'm pretty sure she's the house car you get from Riften. But that's a little beside the point. Although I'm also positive I'm right. But she just reminded me so much of Eve Myers, who of course plays Gwen on Torchwood. And obviously Eve would be a lot older than Iona was, but she just looks so much like a younger Gwen. I couldn't help but think of that every single time it was on screen.
Next up, these characters aren't as important, but they're still worth mentioning. We have a Miriam Teak Lee playing Cora. She is one of the singers, and she has a tragic backstory. But she does sing a hopeful song at the end, and everyone claps, so it's okay.
And it's quite fun to know that she's a singer representing Tryon, which we'll talk about a little later.
Indeed. Then we have Gary and Mike, who seem to be a married couple. Gary played by Charlie Kando, Mike played by Kadif Corwin. And I already forget which does what, but one of them's in the medical profession, the other one's in like technology and such. And both of them are quite useful throughout the events of the episode.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that Mike is the one who works or hard worked for the Interstellar Song Contest and did a lot of the programming. So he's actually quite useful when the doctor finds him.
And then lastly, we have Anita Dobson popping up again as Mrs. Flood. And we all knew she was going to be in this one. Like the trailer for the season that was released all that time ago showed Anita Dobson watching this contest. And it's, I think, one of the first pieces of evidence that she can apparently travel in time somehow. So we knew that she was going to be here, and she actually shows her face pretty early. And that sets up some things that happen down the line. But yeah, it's nice to see her here, and we learn a bit more about her too, which, believe you me, we shall discuss.
Nah, we're not going to talk about it.
Well, I certainly hope we will, but hey, you never know how the day is going to go. But first off, let's talk about the 803rd Interstellar Song Contest, which is taking place in the year 2925. So, in about, exactly 900 years from now, actually.
I'll be there. Yeah, I don't think I'm important enough to be cryogenically frozen.
I was just going to say, if we eat kale and stuff, maybe we can tack on an extra 900 years to our lifespans.
I don't think it works that way.
I've never had kale, so I wouldn't know. Maybe it can do really amazing things. And apparently this sound contest has a viewership of about 3.10 trillion. And in this viewership, and apparently it covers the Western Galactic Arm, but among the planet's viewing includes some familiar names such as Tryon, as James mentioned. And of course, Tryon is the home planet of Tolo. And hey, second episode in a row in which something related to Tolo was either appeared or referenced. So, hoping for a return.
Hey, Mark Strickson has done some big finishes in the past, so maybe it'll happen. I don't think so, but
yeah, it's not
could.
on my bingo card.
I think a couple of bingo cards have been chucked off after today's episode, but
I wouldn't be surprised. We also have Alpha Centauri watching, and we'll talk about a species that needs no introduction. Then lastly, apparently a new Zygon colony was curious as to who would take the prize. So just little bits of references to past planets thrown in here, which is sort of nice. Unexpected, of course, but still nice to see.
It's possibly when, I guess technically out 3, but 2 of them are extremely classic so-centric. I cannot imagine Tryon has been mentioned since Planet Fire.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so. There could have been some reference thrown in some like previous RTD story. You never know. But yeah, I wouldn't think so. I also appreciated the fact that because of the grandeur of the event, there's no communication outside of the space station, and they are on like a space station within their own gravity field. And because of the chance that some people might have to gamble on the results, because they'll be watching it live, whereas the broadcast would reach some places for a long amount of time, they actually cut off communication from the station to anywhere else. So when shit goes down, Belinda and the doctor, not that the doctor was looking for this, but Belinda was, there's no one they can reach out to come help them until the event is over. Yeah, you can see why, but there's some problems there. But as we said, the event is hijacked by Kid with the assistance of Wynn. And, okay, yeah, both are from the planet Halia. And the species is called Halians. And apparently that's a planet with somewhat of a tragic past. It was bought by the corporation. Yeah, and the corporation bought this because the planet had a resource that could be used as additives to, I believe it was a honey. So they bought the planet and the population. I'm assuming they used them as slaves. It doesn't technically, I don't think it technically says it, but that's my assumption. So they used as slaves, then they're maligned by, I'm assuming, the corporation, just so they'll get no sympathy. Because I'll be honest, after you learn the backstory of the planet, can you really blame Kid for trying to get back at the corporation? And we may not have mentioned it, but the corporation is one of the sponsors, or the sponsor of the Interstellar Song Contest. So this company that literally destroyed the planet and its people after buying and enslaving them is just hosting a popular song contest that turns people watch. So I can't say I blame them.
Yeah, I don't know. I do wonder, and I'm going to say this because, hey, this is the Brothers Mahoney. We talk about things like this. How much of this was based on the fact that Israel shows up at Eurovision while they're committing a genocide against the Palestinian people? Because there's certainly a similarity there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like Israel is though sponsoring Eurovision. I'm assuming. I guess I don't know how Eurovision works. Maybe they do. I have no idea. I've never watched Eurovision. I'm never going to. But yeah, you can see how, was Israel even at Eurovision? I honestly don't know.
Yeah, no, not only is Israel at Eurovision, apparently they're in the finalists.
Nice to see some genocide can get you far.
Yeah, no, they do get booed, and even though the network ads it out, people in the audience are holding up Palestinian flags. But nonetheless.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning, and here's a shock if you've listened to any of our past political views, but we are in full solidarity with the people of Palestine.
In any and our ways. Whatever they need to do to get their freedom, I'm down for, and I'll just leave it phrased that way.
So yeah, there may be some type of intended connection there, but who's to say? And we also learned that Cora, who is representing the planet Tryon, she actually is a Halian herself.
Which I kind of suspected rather early on, although the way I was thinking, I guess it would have worked this way. Now that I say it out loud and think about it for more than a few seconds. But I was thinking that she still had her horns, they were just covered with the way that she's tied her hair.
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure I even mentioned it, but yeah, the Halians have horns. Yeah, I may not have referenced it, but yeah, Cora apparently had her horns forcibly removed. I don't think we know the circumstances.
I was thinking the way that she was looking during that, it might have been after she was enslaved, that certain master cut the horns off as like a branding technique.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, but it's never technically says, and she never explains it, so that's the assumption, but you never know. But toward the end, she actually reveals herself as a Hallian, and like we said, after everyone's saved, which we were just about to touch on, she sings a nice song and everyone claps and it's beautiful, and none of that really matters because that's not what we were to talk about. What is worth mentioning is that when the event is hijacked by Kid, one of the things that he does, and I think it was phase 2, he sort of lowers the oxygen barrier, which then causes, or as you can imagine, though in the middle of space, it causes quite a few of the audience members to be sucked out of the station, including, in fact, the doctor. Now, luckily, Belinda is saved last second because she's in, and the doctor was too, but he actually jumped out to do stuff. She's in sort of like one of those stands, and they were able to bring a wall down to quote unquote save Belinda. But the doctor did get sucked out along with quite a few other audience members in quite an epic scene. And it looked quite nice. You can see the special effects looked good. And you can sort of guess that a lot of these people are going to be saved somehow toward the end because they're not usually going to show the death therefore has to be like at least 50, 60,000 people. They actually had a number. I forget what it is, and I didn't write it down. But it's a huge number. So you can expect that they would show the deaths of all of those people.
You can hope. I still argue it would have been a lot cooler if they had died. I mean, maybe it sounds terrible, but imagine if, the doctor stops the Delta wave, if he hadn't been able to save the audience. No, it would have a lot darker ending, but I think there'd be some merit to that. But maybe it just wasn't long enough to take that type of route.
Yeah, despite the Ninth Doctor saying that justice once everyone lives quite an awful amount, because I'm pretty sure no one actually died during this tour.
No, and even at the very end, when you might think that people watching an event happening might get killed, no, that doesn't happen at all. They survive. In fact, nobody died this one, which is amazing considering the scenery of the bodies just floating in space, which looked absolutely horrifying. Like, it looked great, but just the imagination of all those people died at once is terrible. If they had actually stayed dead, it would have been the most deaths we've seen on screen probably ever, unless I guess you saw Planet explode, but I don't really count that as the same.
Yeah, I was going to say, technically speaking, we did see like every planet in the universe disappear once, so would that count as deaths? Or is it that they never existed, so it doesn't really count as deaths?
Well, I think I know, of course I know exactly what we're talking about. I'm just thinking about this in the perspective of, I suppose, physical death, seeing the actual bodies, as opposed to knowing their bodies but not seeing them.
Yeah, and like we said, the doctor himself is one that people sought out, and he's just floating in space. Now, luckily, he was able to extend some type of gravity field, and it's worth mentioning on a side note that the word gravity is brought up a lot of times throughout this episode, because there's multiple references to gravity fields and such. So you hear the word gravity a lot, and I'm still hoping that ties into something within these next 2 episodes, of course, being Wish World and the Reality War. And we've been saying it ever since it first popped up back in Wild Blue Yonder, that I hope it's not just some running joke. I hope it's actually going to tie in somehow to some revelations later on. And I'm still hoping that. And we haven't heard gravity in a little bit, so I'm hoping this is just a way to remind the audience that, yeah, hey, this is a thing.
And to kind of set it up for the season finale.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping happens. So we will see in the next couple of episodes. But yeah, the doctor's floating in space, and it's at this juncture I'm going to mention that if you have not seen this episode, stop listening. Just go. Get the hell out, bruh. We don't want you here.
No, I'm not joking. You've got to go. Because if there's, and this is a spoiler in of itself, but if there's any episode that you should want to watch and not be spoiled, it's probably this one. Which is saying a lot for an episode that on the face of it seems so goddamn unassuming.
Although, I think since the beginning of the season, given the vagueness of this one, we certainly hoped there would be something spicy in this one.
Yes, I think I had mentioned in the last couple of episodes, I was hoping, and I had hoped this for Rogue as well. I hoped that Rogue would have an ending that led into the season finale, but it didn't. This one, however, does have that type of ending and that type of surprising connection to the season as a whole. Because I wasn't particularly looking forward to this one, but it's nice when you don't look forward to something, because when it surprises you, it can really have some effect. And this one took you places, I'll phrase it that way.
Yeah, so with that said, again, hopefully you're gone if you have not watched this. But as the Doctor is floating in space, he sees some brief visions of his granddaughter, Susan, played, of course, by Carol Ann Ford. She has the same haircut. She says grandfather in the same... No, she doesn't say a lot, but she says grandfather in the same tone of voice. And first time since 1983 in the Five Doctors. And of course, Carol Ann Ford has done things past that point with Big Finish and with other things. But the last time we've seen her televised was 1983 in the Five Doctors. So that is a nice return. And she primarily just tells the Doctor, one, go back, which I imagine she means go back, find a way back to the station so you can help save the day. It could also mean, hey, go back to Earth, because her next message is find me. We only see brief flashes of her, I think twice, maybe even 3 times, but she doesn't say much in any of these flashes. But she does say find me, which means that I can't imagine her not popping up somewhere in the final 2-parter.
No, and I just thought about it now. Maybe those weren't... I mean, maybe it's obvious they weren't quote-unquote flashbacks. I was thinking maybe they were just visions, but maybe they're actually a psychic message.
Actually, I didn't think about it, but that could be the case. Certainly, maybe it's some type of long-distance contact.
So certainly the way the Doctor was reacting to it was a little vague. It was kind of hard to glean exactly what he thought it was. If it was just maybe a repressed vision or something, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that he's literally floating in space with no TARDIS. So he's not in the best place, so to speak. So he's able to save himself with, I think, a confetti type thing. He's able to get back to the space station. And for all we know, he could have thought there was some type of seeing the light type thing, that he was about to die and he was just thinking of his granddaughter one last time. And maybe that's what he thought it was, as opposed to something more active, like Susan actually reaching out, if that's in fact what she was doing. So yeah, we don't really know what the Doctor himself was thinking, but it does pop up a couple of times and it's great to see.
I mean, it's just great to see. We were speculating about Carol coming back at the end of season 1.
And not only that, but the Doctor, as early as what the Davos called, has spoken about Susan, and of course she was mentioned by name in The Legend of Ruby Sunday.
Yeah,
out of nowhere it seemed, but
yeah, as a speculation as to maybe that's the identity of Susan Tristan. I thought that was very strange, the way they did that.
So yeah, her name has been dropped throughout this previous season. So we were all hoping that she would pop up again. And it's nice to see that she does. And it's especially going to be nice to see what she does coming up.
And it's so fun because, again, this episode seems so unassuming. But now this episode is always going to be remembered because, in fact, it brought back Susan after so long.
And that's not the only person it brings back. Hey, we'll talk about that.
I mean, we knew the macro coming back. The dance routine, it had to happen.
That's true. If any episode would have the macro return, would it not be the Interstellar Song Contest?
I know they had to have time for the actual plot. I do wish we had seen some more alien species. I'm sure there's a lot of Easter eggs in there, perhaps. But it still would have been nice to see more recognizable Easter eggs, I suppose. I had joked about it, maybe on Twitter, maybe just on Reddit, that I would have liked to have seen a macro dance routine.
And some Vasper form tap dancing.
Oh yes, I also wanted a Vasper form thing as well. Nonetheless, it was still nice to see what we got. It reminded me of a lot of ways of the End of the World, the second episode of the Revival. Just seeing the different alien species that we got. Just all interacting and having what they thought was going to be a nice time.
Yeah, it certainly did have those vibes, at least early on, before they all got sucked out into space, but there you are.
Into everyone's life, little rain must fall.
Yeah, and James mentioned the Daughter Wave too, which is a second part. After everyone's sucked out, Daughter Wave is phase 3 of Kate's plan. But James, if you had to touch on that just briefly.
We had seen the Daughter Wave, and it's funny, we had seen it rather recently on the whole is. The Delta Wave is something we see and hear about in the end of Series 1 of Doctor Who. That was the device that Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth Doctor, was making to try to stop the Daleks. And of course, in that situation, he was making it under an extreme time pressure. So he wasn't actually able to set it to destroy only the Daleks. It would have ended up destroying all of the humans on planet Earth. And I argued in that, and I'll argue again, I think he sort of pressed it, but he did, and then I walked out because of There's Axe Wolf. I still think he sort of pressed it, but anyway, that Delta Wave was only going to kill, I don't know, some billions, probably 96 billion. It was a pretty big number. This Delta Wave is going to kill trillions. What was the amount of people?
I think 3.10 trillion.
Yeah, that's just a couple. It's not gold. I'll phrase it that way. And what they were trying to do is, I guess, make people blame the corporation for it. And the thing is, I'm positive that would have worked. Like, see, I can sympathize with the reasons, and I do, all I want, but
the tactics leave a bit to be desired. What they should have done is hijack the broadcast and then put out a speech or a statement about the horrors of the corporation. But that's not what they did, and that would have been a much better tactic than the way they went about it, in my view.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know, maybe you even kill the audience like they did in Phase 2. Maybe you don't.
But you still need to give reasoning behind your actions, and they never did that. And that was, I think, the biggest blunder.
That's the entire way you spread information. Propaganda. Propaganda is often used as a derogatory term, but in an academic sense, propaganda just means getting your idea across. And you need to have a public face to spread this message saying, Halia was destroyed by the corporation. They enslaved us. We are going to get recompense. We're going to, maybe you don't say revenge, but we're going to get recompense and justice for the genocide of our species. I mean, they were genocided, but come on, they were enslaved. The planet was destroyed, and they were maligned, but most likely by the same corporation as an excuse why the planet was destroyed. People thought they destroyed their planet, which I called bullshit on that the second somebody suggested it, because that sounds like the type of thing you would say about somebody.
Oh, it's Palestine's fault. Why did the Hamas release the prisoners? Fuck you. Just fuck you, bruh. Now, I'm hoping no one listens is pro-Israel, because we don't want you here, to be entirely honest. Like, I'm all for an inclusive audience, but if you're pro-Israel, you're not welcome. Sorry, bruh.
I mean, to be fair, if you want to listen, we can stop you. But we're not getting into a debate about this issue. We're really not.
There's no debate. There's no debate to be had. Come at us, bruh.
Don't come at us, but seriously.
yeah, don't. Because honestly, if there's any type, Israel's not committing a genocide, I'm just deleting those comments. I'm not having it. Hashtag censorship, be ready. But I certainly agree with the idea behind what Kid and Win are doing. I just don't think the tactics they're using are going to be effective. And I wish they had just been, I don't know, maybe badly organized. I wish it had just been more than just Kid and Win. And I have to imagine the planet's destroyed, all the Hallians are scattered across the galaxy and probably be maligned anywhere they go. So under the circumstances, it would be exceptionally hard to organize and reach out to find other Hallians, especially if, like Korra, they're just hiding their identity. So it's not an easy circumstance to organize in, but ideally you would find a group that you could form solidarity with, and then as an organization, go after this corporation. I think that would have worked better, but again, it's really hard to criticize Kid. Maybe it's the best he could have done, though I just wish a little more thought had gone into it.
Yeah, no, I quite agree with that. You need a group for a type of thing like this. Although you have to give it to them for pulling this off with just 2 people. That's impressive. Now, yes, they had an inside man, and that's half the battle. But we just saw Think Tank needing how many people in the plot, at least. I mean, there were a lot of townspeople there, or supposed townspeople. There was like 20 people at the end of the day involved in the plot. At least 4 main ones. But they were able to pull off what would have been a over 3 trillion death toll plan with just 2 people. Give props where it's due. That's impressive. But yeah, if it had been a group, I think it would have battled in terms of actually getting the message and the reasoning out. as opposed to just a huge death toll. Because at the end of the day, what matters is the masses and reasoning and taking down the corporation. Killing these audience people doesn't help anything. It's just going to turn people against your cause. Like, if it was the board of the corporation, go for it, but they were just audience members, so that doesn't really help anything.
Yeah, and the Doctor himself isn't particularly impressed. Now, it's worth mentioning that at this point in time, and this is after he gets back to the station after being frozen in space, he thinks that Belinda is out there frozen. Now, technically still alive. Theoretically, they could get these people back and unfreeze them. But he thinks Belinda is floating out there in space where he promised to save her. And on a side note, they came to his planet initially to get another Vindicator reading, which theoretically would have been enough to get them back to Earth at that exact moment. Problem being that both him and Belinda were interested in watching this Interstellar Song Contest. So Belinda could have gotten back right then, but she wanted to see, hey, who's going to win this space alien stuff with songs I don't recognize. So I'm not quite sure I get her judgment, but hey, whatever. I guess that's the poison of celebrity faces.
I mean, yeah, it's Al Ryland's fault.
So yeah, the Doctor thinks that Belinda is out there floating in space. He's not happy. Over a video link, he confronts Kid, and it's worth mentioning that while she can't communicate with the Doctor, Belinda's actually watching this conversation. And the Doctor kind of goes hard. Now, I don't have this written down, but the Doctor says something to the effect that no matter what you do, one, I'm going to get to you. Then I'm going to, like, throw you into the void or something. Like, he wasn't playing around. He wasn't happy. This isn't your happy-go-lucky Gatwa. This Gatwa is not a happy lad. And his speech is sort of reminiscent of what Capaldi told, what's her name, Me?
Yeah.
At the end of Face the Raven. It's a very similar vibe, only in this instance, Gatwa actually sort of put some action behind his words.
Yeah, no, this is a Doctor turning you into a scarecrow type of shit. Like, this is Time Lord Victorious Unleashed. It's not good. I do quite enjoy how he told Kid, hey, when I get to you, I will get to you. Like, that's not happening. It's going to happen.
Yeah, it's not in question. It's not in question. I will get there.
No, that type of just... I don't think we've seen any, like, Gatwa darkness in any way that I would say was dark, but this was nice to see. In my opinion, I've never seen anything comparable to this from Gatwa since he started. I know this was a nice Gatwa. He's the Doctor after a rehab. He's free. He's more open. But it's still nice to see these last of the Time Lord type moments where, yeah, he's going kind of hard. He's going a bit dark. I mean, he actually turned into the very odd at some point. Maybe that's Gatwa's Doctor.
Yeah, and it might be nice for us to see, and it certainly is. I don't think Belinda was too pleased. Because as she was watching this, she was almost in shock. Like, wait, the Doctor's being, like, really fucking mean here. This isn't him. And it goes further than that. Because as the Doctor says, the Doctor does get to the control room and using some type of light hologram type stuff, he pretty much tortures Kid. Like, he can use a hologram to sort of, it looks like, electrically shock people. And he does this to Kid. Well, he says he's going to do it 3 trillion times, which is the amount of people who would have died had the Delta Wave gone out. And again, he is pissed and he consistently tortures Kid. And that's even after he sees flashes of his granddaughter again, sort of telling him, hey, stop. And the Doctor's like, hey, fuck that, bro. I'm going to torture this guy. And he does. And he only stops because Belinda also makes it to the control room and says, hey, what the hell are you doing, bro? And she doesn't phrase it that way. It's more of a nicer moment where they hug. But he was torturing Kid. And if you didn't think Kid was sympathetic before, and certainly we did, you're certainly sympathetic when he's being tortured by the Doctor.
Although I could certainly see reactionary type people saying, no, that doesn't make him sympathetic at all. And it is interesting to point out that while the Doctor was doing this, one, he mentioned after the fact that he was triggered by the idea of 3 trillion people dying at once. And he compares it to the genocide of his people, which, I don't know, did the Master... No, the Master could have used a death particle. The Master killed the Time Lords after they brought Gallifrey back. And maybe the Master said how he did it. I don't know. And quite frankly, I haven't wanted to go rewatch that.
Yeah, the problem is to actually understand, we need to either read the transcript or go back and watch. That would have been somewhere in Timeless Children.
Yeah, the Timeless Children.
Which we will talk about in the future. but we do not want to willingly, at any point, go back to almost any of Chabno's time. So I forget how the Master genocided the Time Lords. I honestly don't remember, and I'll be even more honest, I don't even care, because it's hard for me to consider that particularly relevant. But I do like the fact that it's that type of event that really, really pisses the Doctor off, and combine that with the fact that Belinda's floating out in space to his, or so he thinks, that he's just torturing this guy. And he doesn't even know the reasons on the side note. No, I don't think that would necessarily change things. But to our knowledge, he doesn't know the reasons why Kid and Win were doing this to begin with. And yet he's just torturing Kid. And yeah, it's a strong scene that really shows the Doctor's darkness if there's no one to hold him back. And hey, look, Belinda's here to hold him back.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of the 10th Doctor with the Rockness. And that was going to be my second point as well, that while we see that Belinda is the one who makes the discovery with Cora about the truth with the Howleans and Halia, the Doctor doesn't get the information. He did this event, this torturing with the Howled Light, with no knowledge of why they were doing any of it. No, it would probably have changed anything, but he didn't even ask. He just went right to it. It's not good.
It's not, but like we said, with some clever ingenuity, he is able to save every single person who is floating in space.
Everybody lives.
Everyone lives indeed. And it's just a happy ending. It's a nice song and people are clapping, and that's nice and all. That seems pretty performative. Like, you can clap at the singer who says, "Hey, I'm from Halia," but then what? Are you going to go after the corporation and dismantle them? Or are you just going to say, "Hey, you won, you're the best," and then just keep on discriminating against the Halians and not employing them and throwing Kid and Win in prison? Are you actually going to do something or just going to clap? So I hope it leads to something, but we don't know. But we can always keep our fingers crossed.
It's very similar to the ending of the Almost People the Rebel Flash, which I think is the correct order.
I was going to say the exact same thing, but I couldn't remember. Like, maybe the Doctor does say exactly what happens, and they, of course, didn't know it, but maybe the Doctor...
I think in that case, that is not how it ends. I mean, it's the 11th Doctor. He doesn't travel that way. But no...
Well, I mean, I guess it's also somewhat comparable to the end of Oxygen, where we do know what happens.
Yeah, no, in that case, yeah, we learn what happens.
So I'm surprised the Doctor wouldn't know what happens at the end of that one, but, whatever.
It's always nice to see a Doctor praising the end of capitalism. And keep in mind, at the end of the day, that's where the corporation did this. It was because of capitalism. Just keep that in the back of your mind. They bring it up in this episode, but that's why it happened. It's boom all over again.
Yeah, I mean, that's what corporations literally do. They make money. They don't care about people. They care about profit.
Look into Chiquita one day and look into the Banana Wars and see how many people died just so Americans can get a nice but fresh banana every day.
Yeah, God bless capitalism, am I right? But yeah, the Doctor and Belinda had quite the trying time. They're walking through this museum, again, with the Graham Norton hologram. And hey, they find out that Earth was destroyed May 24th. So the Doctor and Belinda, well, as you can imagine, like the house going on, Belinda's like, "Hey, that's the day I left." Luckily, because the Vindicator did its job and they have the TARDIS back, they go straight to that time, to that day. In fact, I think the cloister bars go off. The whole TARDIS turns red. Things don't look good. Then I forget technically if the Doctor opens the door or if it blows open. But the episode ends literally with the Doctor and Belinda in a TARDIS, and it seems like there's an exploding force from the outside, exploding inward. Does not look healthy, and that's literally how the episode ends before a, I guess, mid-credit scene. But yeah, it's a particularly good cliffhanger to end on.
Yeah, no, I literally told the stream to fuck off when it ended that way because I want to know how it continues. It's strange for me to say because I haven't been this way for most of the recent Revival series in any way, but I was invested in the way that this episode ended. It reminded me so much of the type of dynamic energy you found in this Stolen Earth. If you haven't seen this Stolen Earth in a while, go watch it. That beginning is so goddamn good in the Doctor trying to figure out what happened to Earth. And in a lot of ways, this season's reminded me of that because the Doctor and Belinda have a little portion during this episode where they think, "Oh, okay, Earth must be fine. Hey, Ryland's alive." But then the hologram says, "Yeah, no, wrong. Earth was destroyed on this exact date." and they just rush to go and figure out what happened. They arrive at the date, and literally the TARDIS door blows open. Now, I'm not sure what that means for how this next episode is going to start. I have theories about that. But it doesn't look good, and I love the inclusion of the cloister ball. The cloister ball also went off at the end of Torn Laughter going into the Stolen Oath. And the cloister ball has been around for a long time. It has shown up in some classic Who episodes, and it's always nice to hear. It always gives a feel of, no, shit's really going down. This is not good stuff. Because it doesn't go off willy-nilly for anything. It goes off for literally universe-ending events.
Yeah, a guy trips, you're not going to hear the cloister ball, but guy trips over a paradox and 60 trillion Reapers come by. Might be a time for the cloister ball.
Now I want the Reapers in the season finale, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Hey, it's Wish World. Maybe whatever you wish can happen.
The macro dance routine, there we go.
It's been after our hearts all this time. But like I alluded to, well, that is the end of what we see for the Doctor, maybe quite literally. We do see more, because we mentioned that Mrs. Flood was in the audience, which again we knew from the pre-season trailers. And she too gets sacked out, and luckily she gets revived. In fact, she is the last person revived. And it's worth mentioning, or it should be worth mentioning, that earlier while she was in the audience, she was using a pair of those like opera binoculars that you sometimes see if you go to the opera. I'm sure Grace knew exactly how to use them.
I'm sure Grace used them very gracefully.
Amazing Grace. She was a woman.
I still can't believe that the very next companion is Rose, but it's such an amazing difference.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But Mrs. Flood is using those binoculars to check out the Doctor. She apparently expected the Doctor to be there, and she knew whereabouts where he would be.
And she once again mentioned the Vindicator as well, which she did in the wall.
Yeah, so she is indeed interested in the Vindicator, and we don't know why. But we do know a few things. Her health is not ideal even after being revived.
And she says, and I quote, "I'm afraid my double brainstem froze. Lethal for time, lady, but I've got my own knack for survival." And that kind of causes you hard to explode at this point.
Yeah, she is indeed a time lady, and she has a bi-generation, which I'm still not wild on the bi-generations.
I kind of find it hilarious. I swear it's the only reason that this was a bi-generation is because they wanted to continue to use Nita Dobson along with the next incarnation, because Nita Dobson's been the face of this the entire time of RTD2.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And it turns out that Mrs. Flood is none other than, insert drum roll, the Rani. And there have been discussions on whether or not she was the Rani since I think she first appeared back in Church and Ruby Road, to be entirely honest. As James was saying earlier, anytime a mysterious woman pops up whom we don't know the identity to, everyone guesses for the Rani as one of the first guesses. And hey, in this case, they're not wrong, it's the Rani.
Oh my god, I just got a best idea. Imagine if instead of the Rani, the Time Lady, you're talking about Rani from the Sarah Jane Adventures, and she became a Time Lady herself. That's where it's going, guys. You heard it here first.
Yeah, and I've not seen much of the Sarah Jane Adventures, so I don't know who Rani is. I'm going to assume they're the daughter of the Rani, so I guess I'll find out later. But the Rani regenerates or bi-generates, and we see that the next incarnation looks quite a bit younger than what Mrs. Flood looks like. Of course, Mrs. Flood is still here, and the new regeneration is portrayed by Auchi Punjabi. And we didn't see a lot of her, though she does have a pretty forceful personality. But she does have a lot of similarities to the original Rani. And we've mentioned the Rani before because she's been on the tips of people's tongues since this revival series started. The Rani first appeared in Mark of the Rani, which was a 6th Doctor story, and then appeared again in Time and the Rani, which was the first story of Sylvester McCoy, which is a sort of odd story. But it's worth mentioning that those are the only 2 times that she appears in classic Doctor Who. Time and the Rani airing back in 1987, so about 38 years ago. Now, to be fair, the Rani did appear in Dimensions in Time, which came out in 1993. But aside from whether or not that's canon, it doesn't really matter. It's also not widely respected. So yeah, the Rani appears there, but I think I prefer to think of her last appearance as Time and the Rani. And I forget, do you remember the name of the actress who played the Rani?
That would be Kate O'Mara, who actually died about 10 years ago in 2014. The original Rani actress. So it's nice to see her legacy continued.
Yeah, that's disappointing. And Archie Punjabi does seem, based on the very little bit we've seen of her, she seems to have some of the same personality traits that Kate O'Mara portrayed as her voice in the Rani. So it's nice.
No, yeah, and just the minute we got of her, she felt very much to me like the Rani. No, I have a lot of questions, and you can't just throw the Rani in my face and I'm going to lap it up.
Yeah, because it's nice that the Rani is back. I've wanted the Rani to return for a long time, but they better handle the character well. And I just want to say this, the Rani is not the master. They have entirely different goals, and certainly times have changed since then. I mean, think about all that Gallifrey has been through since time and the Doctor. But the Rani is not the master. So I'm not sure what the Rani's interest in the Doctor and or the Vindicator is. But there should be no quote unquote personal vendetta for anything that we're aware of. That's not who the Rani is. The Rani's interested in science and experimentation, often unethically, but she's interested in science. She doesn't care about the Doctor. She doesn't care about the Master. In fact, in Mark of the Rani, we see both the Master and the Rani interact, and it's hilarious. Like, they work together, but they can't stand each other. Actually, I don't think the Master particularly cares, but you can tell the Rani has a distaste toward the Master and his party rivalry with the Doctor. It's just sort of funny.
Yeah, it's really worth revisiting. Now, I didn't mind this story, but if you are reluctant to watch a Sixth Doctor story one, you're wrong. But nonetheless, I would say watch it just for the interactions between the two, because the Rani cannot stand the Master. And after I saw this reveal, I don't want the Master to show up in the season finale. I know some people have said, hey, the Master. I'd really say that's going a little far. I must say, I would love to see this new Rani play off of Saka Darwin's Master, because she would loathe him. Absolutely loathe him. And it would be hilarious to witness.
Yeah, and of course, I don't know where the two-part finale is going, but I am worried about one thing, and that's the idea that it could be a bit messy. Because, for one, Mrs. Flood, because of the biogeneration, Mrs. Flood will be there. Of course, this new Rani, Archie Punjabi, will be there. Conrad from Lucky Day has to show up. If he doesn't, then the end of Lucky Day would make no sense. So Conrad has to show up. I have to imagine Susan is going to show up. Of course, Caroline Ford. A lot of people suspect, and I don't think they're wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jo Martin in some capacity popped up, because she would have come back for Story in the Ancient for just a 10-second cameo and then fuck off for the rest of the show. I have to imagine she's going to be involved somehow in this final two-parter. And then we have this space baby Poppy, who popped up randomly in Story in the Ancient for, as far as we can tell, no reason. So I'm just saying, with all of those elements, and let's not forget Unit and Mal. So there's going to be a lot of things happening, and I don't know if even 2 episodes is going to be enough to make that not feel messy. So I'm worried about, of course, them handling the Rani and her character with respect. Because if they mess up the Rani, I will be unhappy, and I will not be afraid to show my unhappiness. Because, yeah, I've been happy with this season so far, but like we've said before, if the ending falters, then that's not an ideal thing. So I'm concerned about that, but I'm also concerned with the amount of characters that they have to work with. I just don't know how they can pull it off without it feeling quite a bit messy, to be honest with you.
Well, that's the thing about RTD. He sometimes has kind of messy finales. And keep in mind what happened at the end of last season, where I'll say, and I said it then, I'll say it now, they misused Sutak. They brought back Gabriel Wolf, a actor in his 90s, and they misused him on his return after a very long time in Doctor Who. And Sutak was long awaited, but I think they completely misused him in the way they did it. It was set up pretty well. The ending didn't go. And maybe, for all the excitement of having the Rani back, maybe the Rani will be misused. Now, I did see this great theory on Reddit, and if they go this route, I'll accept it. I'll be happy with it, because it kind of ties things together neatly. that the Rani doesn't care about the Doctor as the Doctor, but maybe she knows that he's the timeless child. And that she might be interested in, that she might be interested on experimenting on. That would be a great way to connect the science aspect of the character to what seems like an interest in the Doctor. Alternatively, maybe she's interested in the Vindicator. Now, that seemed like a basic thing when the Doctor made it. Maybe it's more interesting than that. Either way, something like that could be why she's interested.
If the Rani was interested in the Doctor, they had ample opportunity to get him so many times. Like, as James mentioned, I think in the last episode, only once has Mrs. Flat actually interacted with the Doctor, and that's when she was encouraging the Doctor to take Ruby on as a companion. So I'm not sure what that has to do with the Rani's plans of theoretically experimenting on the timeless child. So I don't know why the Rani would care that Ruby would travel with the Doctor. The Rani, as we knew the Rani wouldn't care who traveled with the Doctor. She wouldn't care one iota. So I'm not sure what her plan is, but I'm just hoping they don't misuse her character because, yes, it's great that the Rani's back, but like James said, they brought Sutak back for that? Fucking kidding me? It's not just us who disliked Empire of Death. That was a widely panned finale. And if they misused the Rani in a similar way, I would be deeply disappointed. No, that's sad, because there's so many moving parts. Yeah, they could screw over the Rani, but hey, maybe they'll use Conrad or Susan in a really cool way. So maybe the fact that they didn't use the Rani in the right way might not be as big a deal, but everything still sort of ties in together and it still matters. And I really hope that these last two episodes treat the Rani with the respect that so many fans for characterization deserve.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm very interested in the season finale more than I was going into the Legend of Ruby Sunday. Mostly because I never connected to Ruby's mystery all that much. And apparently neither did RTD. But I am very apprehensive of how RTD is going to tie this out together, because this is a hell of a lot to get together in just 2 episodes. Especially if the first episode takes to the 50 minutes that most of these have been.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that I'm not going to judge the episode before it happens. Of course I'm not going to. Nor am I, of course, going to praise it before it happens. It has the potential to be a really quality 2-part finale. And I'm hoping it works out. But with the amount of characters, again, Kate, Rose, potentially Poppy, potentially Susan, certainly the Rani, there's just so many characters here that I just have a difficult time imagining it working. But fingers crossed that RTD can pull it out.
Yeah, obviously at the end of the day, we're not hoping for it to fail. We're hoping for it to be good. Because we like Doctor Who. We're fans of the show and we want to enjoy Doctor Who. We were not happy lads during the Whittaker era because the writing, in our opinions, wasn't good. And a lot of people agreed with us on that. And we just want this to be good. So, it might sound like we're being a little overcritical before the fact, but we saw Empire of Death and how that concluded the Ruby mystery with her mother, and we saw what they did to Sutak. It's not wrong for us to wonder what's going to happen in the season finale here.
Yeah, you can certainly understand the apprehension that we feel. I think it's a very valid apprehension, and I just hope that RTD proves us wrong. But hey, we will see. And as for the episode as a whole, I didn't mind, and I thought the whole Interstellar Song Contest portion was interesting. Nice story, Hallians, good people like us. But the thing is, in a story like this, when it brings back both the Rani and Caroline for the Susan, I'll be honest, I don't think that part matters that much. No, I think a lot of it's good. I think it's interesting. And I think it looked really good. Like, special effects wise, the scene when people were being sucked out into space, that looked really fucking cool.
And horrifying.
But at the same time, it doesn't matter, because we also have the return of the Rani and the return of Caroline for the Susan. Those are the two things that I suspect, and I haven't been on Twitter yet, but once I go on Twitter, I suspect it's what everyone's going to be talking about, for good reason. Because again, we haven't seen the Rani in 38 years, we haven't seen Susan in 43 years or something like that. So, this is an important episode for those two aspects alone. And overall, I think it's a pretty quality episode. It's hard to say how good it is until we see what comes next. because the end of this immediately ties into whatever the Doctor is going to go through in Wish World and the reality world. But overall, I thought it was quite a good episode, and certainly, like James said, the way it gets you excited for the upcoming episodes, I think, really benefits this story. It really makes you want to see what's coming up next. And I think that as a hype episode, this one will be generally pretty well remembered, and I think for good reason too.
The pouch with the Interstellar Song Contest and the plot with the Howlians, all of that worked well enough on its own. I don't know if it's going to win any awards. I don't know if anything that happened was too surprising. Like I said, I kind of suspected that one woman would have been a Howlian. But it did its story very well. I expected to not like that portion of the episode, but it worked out pretty well. And I think we had theorized that maybe this had to do with terrorism, because how else was a story going to happen with the Interstellar Song Contest? And so I guess we were right in that aspect. We would not have been able to guess the reasons. But as Michael said, and I said earlier, this episode, at the end of the day, unfortunately in some aspects, I think a lot of people are going to forget all of that because of the return of Susan and because of the return of the Rani. Now, there are some people who don't care about those things, maybe some people who haven't seen Classic Who, and that doesn't mean anything to them. And I mean, to be fair, how many people started watching this series on the Church on Ruby Road? I don't know what percentage watching, but I'm sure there are people who did.
That's actually a good point, and I just want to cut in for a quick second. If you have no idea who the Rani is and you want to see something with the Rani in it before this next two-parter, I would highly recommend you watch Mark of the Rani, which is a Sixth Doctor story. I have no idea. I'm assuming it's streaming somewhere over in the UK. I really don't know.
I think it's streaming on Daily Motion, if nothing else.
Yeah, that's true. You can find it online on Daily Motion.
Hell, it's on Internet Archive, if I'm not mistaken, too.
Assuming that's the same in the UK as it is in the US. Could be theoretically different copyright. But I would highly recommend watching Mark of the Rani if you're interested in the Rani as a character, if you don't have any experience with them. So that's just me saying you might want to give it a go, get a little taste of Classic Who, and again learn a little bit about the Rani before seeing how she is in the upcoming finale.
Yeah, and I second that. I think Mark of the Rani is very good. I mean, I'm not going to recommend Time on the Rani. It was not as bad as people say, but it wasn't great.
Although if you want to see a regeneration story without using the previous Doctor, that is one for you.
Yeah, that's not going to be forgotten anytime soon. But yeah, at the end of the day, that story of the episode with the Howlians is going to get overpowered, but it was still a good story on the whole. And it was a great ending. Like, hey, they're under Disney. Of course they're going to have a mid-credit scene. Maybe that was in the contract. Look at the MCU movies. They invented it, and now it seems like everybody does it. Doctor Who is no different. But it was a very exciting scene, the ending with Belinda and the Doctor, and wondering what's going to come of that. And then having the mid-credit scene come along, like it was an MCU movie, saying, oh, by the way, this is also going to happen. I thought it was done really, really well. And as apprehensive as I am quite looking forward to the season finale here. With fingers crossed, it works out.
But that's just our thoughts in the Interstellar Song Contest. Please, by all means, let us know what you thought either here below on YouTube or over on Twitter at Brothers Mahoney. As I said, this episode, I can imagine, is going to generate a lot of conversation. So we can only hope that Davis can nail this two-part finale. I really hope he does. And this episode sort of psyched me up. And I hope I'm not getting psyched up for nothing. But again, hey, it could happen. We just have to be cautiously optimistic as we have been the whole season and hope it works out. And that's where I am right now. But any last thoughts on this one, James?
Yeah, on the whole, this has been a much better season than the first season, I would say. I liked Belinda a lot more. I've liked the story arc. Because they had the story arc that seems like it actually kind of matters. I've liked the season a lot more, and I just hope that they can pull out the season finale a lot more than the one for the first season.
But yeah, that's all we've got. So thanks for listening. As always, this has been Michael.
And I've been James.
And we have been the Brothers Mahoney. Have yourself a pleasant day. Let's get ready for this finale.